Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt, and this is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Competizione. And for 2024, it's received a facelift, the first since it's come out in 6 years. And today, me and my lovely wife have spent the last week in Colorado driving this thing around and testing it, and we're going to talk about the best and the rest. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about on the con side of the video has to do with kind of the aging platform and thus the technology of this car. Now, first of all, you don't get a phone as a key. It shows its age a little bit. You don't have ambient light. You don't have a cooled seat option here. You don't have a head-up display. Your center screen is running the old technology. The new 2024 facelift gets the new digital instrument cluster, which is fabulous. We saw it in the Tonale. But the old center screen here, the thing that you interact with most, is running the old software. It's really, really laggy. You don't get wireless Apple CarPlay, and you don't get a 360 camera. It's just kind of whack. And then we are going to talk about cargo practicality and trunk space. It does ding 3-4 times and then go up. It is powered, of course. It does say it has hands-free gesture technology. I haven't gotten that to work, but maybe it does. Anyway, we look at the space itself, and the issue with this space is it's 18.5 cubic feet of space. That is the smaller end of the spectrum, but more concerningly than that is this is a smaller trunk than you'd get even in the smaller cousin Tonale. But the seats do fold from the rear here, and when they are folded, you get about 56.5 cubic feet of space. Sounds a lot better, and it is, but it is still going to be on the smaller end of the spectrum. And if you were thinking you were getting a lot more storage underneath, not really. You get a couple cubbies back here, but realistically, you're probably not going to use them that much. But you do have grocery bag hangers back here, LED lights. It's not totally impractical. It is just on the smaller side of the spectrum if you're going to compare this thing to something like an X3 or a GLC. More practical than the M4 competition, but even still, 2 suitcases take up basically the whole trunk. And in tandem with the trunk, we are going to talk about the back seat because it also is on the small side. We'll talk about materials first. You can have a padded leather up here on your door. You do have a little textured plastic up there, so it gives it a little bit of sense of richness. But then we look at the space itself in here. Now, this is the black interior with the red contrast stitching you can kind of see throughout. This is the only way you're going to get your Competizione. But as I step in here, remember I'm 6'1", I'm seated behind myself. Not huge, it's bearable, but the weird thing is, this again is on the smaller side of the spectrum, and it also is a smaller back seat space than you're gonna get in the little cousin Tonale. Headroom, it's a little tight. Maybe you can hear my head or my hair kind of rustling up there. It's okay. You get some storage practicality with map pockets. You do get some air vents back here. You get some USB-A chargers, and then 3-level heated seats, which I think is kind of nice. And then one little Easter egg that I think is kind of cool here. Drop down, you do have cup holders with a little dedicated phone slot here, but you also have Alfa Romeo here in the script on your center console. So that's kind of nice, but it is small. And then I do want to touch on build and materials for a second, because this is fighting against things like BMW X3s and Audi Q5s, and I think in terms of materials and build quality, it's just not quite on that level. It's definitely above something like a RAV4, but definitely not something like a Q5. You do get this kind of center console. It does have a tendency to creak when you're messing with stuff, and then the leather work is actually pretty nice. You get a leather wrapped dash with the red stitching, very Competizione, but this is a plastic. I might like to see a wood option or an actual genuine alloy, metallic type feel. And then the leather that's on your steering wheel, perforation's very nice, red stitching very nice. Same thing with your seats down here. They're 3-level heated. You cannot get cooled. You also get a heated steering wheel, but the leather is fine. You get red stitching, and you even get embroidery up in the headrest that says Alfa Romeo and the new Competizione trim there on your headrest. But now switching gears and talking about all the best things about this car, we're going to start with the fun aspect of how you drive it. And we're on this mountain road, which is the best place to really demonstrate that, because when you're just driving around casually from light to light in the city, you're not going to get the most out of this car. It's only when you take this thing on a mountain pass and you start to push it a little bit more that it really starts to come alive and show you the benefits of the Alfa Romeo. Now, you get these huge paddle shifters for your 8-speed transmission, and I really, really love them. They're very fun to shift, very satisfying, love the feel. This Competizione also gets adaptive suspension, and you have to drive it in D mode, in Dinamica mode, because that's the only way that you can get into the stiff damper setting. When you're not in the stiff damper setting, and you're just in Naturale or advanced efficiency, it does have a tendency to wallow and wump over medium bumps, maybe just the roads here, but my wife and I have both found that this is most tolerable and best enjoyed in D mode. Drive it aggressively, get a little bit stiffer ride, the chassis will respond, and it'll definitely reward you for it. And then when it does come to power, you do have the most powerful engine and output in the segment. 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, 280 horsepower, 306 pound-feet of torque, through the 8-speed, down to all 4 wheels. This does have Q4 all-wheel drive. 0 to 60 is good for about 5.5 seconds. And then you also will get like 24-ish MPG, which is pretty consistent with what we've seen here this week, even through these mountain roads. But yes, this is best enjoyed and really kind of, in my opinion, only enjoyed when you are hustling it a bit. You get some grip in the tires, you get the turbo spooling, you enjoy a little curve, a little mountain road. That is where this car shines. If you're never gonna drive it hard, get something else. But if you are gonna drive it hard, yeah, it responds. Another thing that I really like about this car is the styling. It's a lot more unique than what you get from Germany or even Japan otherwise, but it's very classic Alfa even with the new facelift. Part of the new facelift, and really the main thing that changed, is just the headlights. You've got these kind of triple beam running lights. They look a little bit more interesting than kind of the general old style, but the rest of the face is kind of the same. You've got the classic Alfa triangular beak with a more embellished lower front intake with the radar cruise detector. Down here it says Alfa Romeo, but my favorite thing about this car is the paint. This is Moonlight Silver. This is Alfa's first matte finish paint color, $1,750. Sounds like a big number, but for a matte finish paint, I mean, Mercedes is going to charge you like 5-6 grand for that. So I think this is actually a pretty good deal. We'll come around to the side and take a look at the styling here. Alfa Romeo script in the headlight, 20-inch wheel here, kind of finished in like a dark gray or black, and then you've got red painted Brembo brakes that say Alfa Romeo on them, and this is specific to the Competizione trim, which you have here on your front fender. But then zooming out, taking a look at the profile itself, I think it's got a really nice shape to it. What do you think? You said it's less bean-like, right?
Yeah, it's very nice. So like you just said, less bean-like with a lot of cars in this segment. Really like the shoulder.
The hip.
And the back hip.
Yeah.
Those look really nice
Yeah.
and sporty.
And I think the shadowing and the toning looks really good with the matte finish when you get some of the lighting coming down. But ultimately, I think it looks really good. It's very unique and it's very recognizable Alfa Romeo. And then around the side, or around the rear, I guess I should say, again, not a lot has changed for the facelift. Maybe some slightly different changes in your LED taillight, but you still have the familiar badging and the familiar embellished lower diffuser with dual enlarged exhausts. This is a more sporty-oriented car. You can kind of tell from the styling and the Alfa Italian heritage, but it actually does have a lot of muscle as well. This thing will tow up to 3,000 pounds, which is actually a pretty big amount. It could probably tow most trailers and smaller boats, so that's pretty good. And I know we already talked about some of the technology and some of the interior build and materials, but I think the design itself merits a little bit of conversation because it does again look a little bit more unique than everything else in this segment. You've got more swooping lines, you've got the double bubble dash, and you do have the older screen here, but you've got a fully digital instrument cluster. But I really like the steering wheel. It's kind of got that Alfa charm here with a start-stop on the steering wheel itself. Nobody else is really doing that. You've got the huge paddle shifters, which are kind of fun. And then down here in your center console, you do have the Digi-Stick, but you have a little Italian heritage right there, and then your DNA drive selector. But one of the things that I really like is the fact that you do have physical buttons for your heated seat, heated steering wheel, and your climate controls. And I think you have some thoughts on that as well.
Very much. In every one of my cars, it requires physical buttons.
Yes, she loves physical buttons, and it makes a lot of sense. And the last thing we'll talk about before we go for a bit of a drive is the price. And the Alfa Romeo Stelvio starts at about $45,000. That's for a Sprint trim with rear-wheel drive, and notably that is $2,000 cheaper than you would get in the comparable rear-wheel drive BMW X3. So you're saving a bit of money here. Now, as tested with the new Competizione trim, this thing is about $57,000 to start, and as tested, it's about $60,000 with destination and delivery. So it starts to be a little bit expensive, but I think we'll hop behind the wheel and talk if it's worth it or not. Got the Stelvio in D mode. Foot down, turbo leg. There's turbo. And shifting. Okay. So this is something that says competition on the back. And maybe it's because I was just in the BMW M3 competition. That was a very different experience. This is okay, but I want to give you a chance to talk about things that stood out to you this week with the car.
Well, as we were driving through the canyons and going to the national park. Being a passenger wasn't the best experience.
You're talking about the ride.
Yeah.
So what we've kind of discussed is basically it's most tolerable in D mode. And specifically D mode, this has the adaptive dampers in the stiff damper setting. Because in N mode and A mode, you get a lot of wallow. You get a lot of like lateral weight transfer, and it kind of made you feel nauseous.
A little sick, yes. And as you know, I don't really get car sick. So that was interesting. But yeah, it was when we were driving in that more relaxed feel, it even had kind of like felt like a lateral movement.
Yeah, it did feel kind of wumpy. It was just doing a bunch of this.
Yeah, and as a passenger, that's not very nice.
It's not great behind the wheel either. So yeah, it's just weirdly soft for something that says competition on the side of it.
But I will say, as far as actually being in the car, in the seat, it is a very comfortable seat to be in.
Yeah, the seats are good. They're well bolstered. They hug you.
Yes.
Pretty nice. Yeah, so I guess what I would say is the best place to drive this car is on a road like this. We're kind of on a twisty mountain road. You can kind of hustle it a little bit. You put it in D mode. You get a little bit of spool in the turbo and it reacts a little bit better. But when you're just driving it like to the shops, to a Starbucks or the grocery store or something, it is just kind of floaty. There's a bunch of turbo lag and the throttle mapping is kind of weird. The brake feels kind of strange.
Yeah, in every setting, the brake is slightly different.
Yeah.
So definitely more gentle actually in this D mode.
It's more predictable, it seems.
Yeah, more
so
predictable.
I can modulate it better.
Yeah, so when you're in that A or even N, it really takes a while for it to kick in, and then as a passenger, you really thrust yourself forward and come back.
Yeah.
Not the greatest.
Yeah, it is interesting the way that this thing drives. But getting away from the drive for a second, I also do want to talk about just some of the other weird things that stood out to me this week. And I don't want this to be just like a rag session on this car, but there's very quirky Italian or Alfa things going on. Like the fact that it would just like randomly bong at us as we drove through Boulder.
Yeah, that was really, and we couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
Nothing came on the dash, nothing came on the info, nothing blinking.
No message. Just
none whatsoever.
random bong.
And we were stopped at a light.
It did it a number of times. It's just weird. It is one of those strange kind of things. And I kind of think back to, I think something another journalist said a while ago. It's like, if everything worked 100% of the time, it wouldn't be an Alfa Romeo, it would be a Mercedes. So maybe that's the charm, but for me, when I buy a car, especially a new 2024 car, I have the expectation that everything works as intended all the time.
Right.
More or less. So that was a little bit strange. And then I guess the other thing that kind of stuck out to me was just, it's small. This is a 6-7-year-old car at this point. The platform is just not super efficiently maximized for use of space in the trunk and the rear seat. The tonale, which is a lot smaller from an exterior footprint, has the same or bigger trunk space with the rear seats up and a bigger back seat. So that's maximizing its platform a lot better. I mean, we've got 2 carry-on bags with us, 2 hiking packs, and my film backpack.
Yeah.
And like the suitcases are the only things that fit in the trunk. The rest of it has to go in the back seat because it's just not that big and practical. But is there anything else that kind of stood out to you that you wanted to mention?
Plug-in, did you mention that?
Oh yeah, wired CarPlay, which is a bit annoying.
For me, I don't really mind that, just because with my own car, I have a lot of Bluetooth connection issues.
Yeah, but you're also driving a 2016.
That's true. I am doing that.
So this is 8 years newer.
Yeah, but for me, just I guess driving a 16, I prefer to have a plug-in just so I know that it'll work.
Yes.
I like that feature.
Yes, fair play. The CarPlay did work every time.
Yeah, very well.
That was fine. But yeah, a lot of the technology is just a little bit older. The new digital cluster is great. I think the styling is great. When you're driving this thing harder, it's fun. It's just, there are double-edged swords with this car, so just be aware of it if you're going to get into something like this. But I think at that point, I want to say thank you to Alfa Romeo for letting us have a go in your Stelvio for this past week in Colorado. It's been a wonderful trip, so thank you for facilitating that. And thank you to you for watching, and thank you to you, Sadie, for being here. And we'll see you in the next one.